Rising from the ashes, Hiroshima is reborn. The atomic bombing of Hiroshima, Japan on August 6, 1945 was an immense tragedy causing cataclysmic damage to the city's population and culture. Despite this, the destruction of Hiroshima also inspired triumph as seen in the unity of the Japanese as they came together to rebuild and restore their beloved city. Without the atomic bombing, Hiroshima would never have become the thriving city it is today.
Before World War II, Hiroshima was a bustling city, full of life. Its economy was booming, and it was one of Japan's largest cities, with a population of around 300,000 people. Hiroshima was an extremely important port and a center for communication, as well as a storage point and assembly area for troops. At the time, the Japanese led deeply religious and traditional lives. Religion and nature were often intertwined, with the latter being stressed as an aesthetically enveloping and naturally energizing force. Trees were especially significant, representing everything from spring to spirituality. Gardens often accompanied the many Buddhist and Shinto shrines that provided the foundation for the city's strong cultural roots.
While Nazi Germany had been defeated in the May of 1945, World War II still raged on between the Allies and Japan. The US tragically determined that the use of an atomic bomb would be necessary in ending the war both quickly and effectively. To narrow down the targets for the atomic bomb, the US created a list of criteria. These included the range of the aircraft which would carry the bomb, the probable weather conditions in the target areas, and the morale and military effect on the Japanese people. Based off these factors, the US selected 5 cities as potential targets. These included Nagasaki, Kokura, Hiroshima, Kyoto, and Niigata. Although Hiroshima had remained largely untouched for the duration of World War II, this would soon change with the detonation of the atomic bomb.
On August 6, 1945, the American B-29 bomber Enola Gay flew over Hiroshima, dropping an atomic bomb in its wake. The bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, exploded about 1,900 feet over the unsuspecting city. The primary blast from Little Boy's detonation resulted in the tragic and devastating deaths of around 80,000 people instantly. The bomb's mushroom cloud was so large that it was visible even from the retreating Enola Gay, which was 5 miles over the city at the time. Upon witnessing the destruction that the bomb had caused, the pilot of the plane, Paul Tibbets, exclaimed, "My God, what have we done?" In the next 2 to 4 months after the tragic bombing, the death toll only increased as residual effects, such as radiation, led to the deaths of another 90 to 146,000 people. Meanwhile, survivors of the bombing had to deal with crippling physical damage. Acute radiation poisoning ravaged the bodies of those who had made it through the blast. A significant number of victims also received burns from the firestorm that blazed through the city after the bomb's detonation. Those who were able to recover from their injuries still faced trauma and psychological damage. The horrors that emerged in the aftermath of the bombing had a deep emotional impact on the Hiroshimans. One survivor, Takashi Tanemori, can still recall how a soldier pulled him from the ruins of his school on the day of the bombing.
There was a man, I think he was a man, unrecognizably burned, scarred, and marred. You can't tell it, but I knew that was a man. He said to soldiers who's clutching me in his arm, he said, "Water, water, please, water." And the soldier just...
Sadako Kurihara also expressed the aftermath in her poem, Ruins. Hiroshima, after the bombing. Hiroshima, nothing, nothing. Old and young, burned to death. City, blown away. Socket without eyeball. White bones scattered over reddish rubble. Above, sun burning down. City of ruins, still as death.
The tragic impacts of the bombing also stretched out beyond its human costs. In addition to the deaths, Little Boy destroyed about 90% of Hiroshima's buildings and infrastructure. This included the many shrines and parks that were vital to the Hiroshimans' religion and culture. In fact, Little Boy incinerated large parts of the natural beauty that the Japanese so revered. The majority of trees within the 2-kilometer radius of the bomb's epicenter were torn out of the ground or snapped in half. The surviving nature had been burned by the blast. Many Hiroshimans were wary of the radiation in and around the city's soil. They believed that this radiation would prevent anything from growing in Hiroshima for at least 75 years. Since nature had an immense religious and cultural importance, this was a devastating blow to the Hiroshimans, tragically crushing their morale even further. To them, the idea that nature could be subdued by Western science was the ultimate form of desolation.
For a while, it seemed that recovery from the tragic bombing was impossible. However, by the autumn of 1945, plants began to sprout from the scorched earth, showing the Hiroshimans that life in the area was still possible. Soon, trees, such as the camphor and ginkgo, grew new shoots from their charred and broken branches. This revival of Hiroshima's greenery gave the Hiroshimans new hope. As the natural portions of Hiroshima began to recover, aid and support for those affected poured in from all over Japan. Basic necessities, such as sewage, the trolley system, and electricity were restored, the dead were buried, and rubble was cleared. With the help of numerous volunteers, multiple replanting projects took place throughout the city. Trees and infrastructure that survived the blast became important symbols of Hiroshima's resilience. Recovery efforts brought the Hiroshimans together to form a sense of unity. According to city officials, Hiroshima's reconstruction was not an attempt to create everything anew. It was instead a movement to bring back social functions, culture, and traditions that had existed in the Hiroshiman communities before the bombing. Soon, Hiroshimans began to focus on restoring their culture and identity. As the city developed, many important cultural structures, such as the Hiroshima Castle and Nijitsu Shrine, were rebuilt.
So whilst it is obvious to the world that the bombing of Hiroshima was a tragedy, can we extract any good from it? Can we indeed say there was an element of triumph, or to see the bombing of Hiroshima as something which called forth an incredible response from the Japanese people is in no way to condone that bombing, but it does show you that under extreme duress, human beings can do remarkable things, and therefore we should perhaps focus on how human beings are able to bounce back and are incredibly positive in their responses to terrible events.
Through its restoration from tragedy, Hiroshima has paved the way to recovery for other places facing devastating disasters such as New York City. There, a pear tree became a symbol of hope and restoration after enduring the 9/11 terror attacks. In the aftermath of the attacks, the tree was found greatly damaged with snapped roots and burnt branches. Through the effort and care of New York City civilians, the tree finally began to grow again, and so was dubbed the Survivor Tree. Today, the tree stands as a living reminder of the resilience, survival, and rebirth, just like the multiple survivor trees in Hiroshima. Through its pain and struggles, Hiroshima has become a shining example and beacon of hope for cities such as New York City to learn from during times of tragedy.
Over 70 years after the tragic bombing, Hiroshima has triumphantly recovered into a vibrant green city. It is now a large manufacturing hub that is home to over 1.1 million people. Hiroshimans relax and immerse themselves in the tranquility found in the city's many parks. Skyscrapers line the streets in the downtown. The rebuilt Buddhist and Shinto shrines have restored Hiroshima's spirituality. At the heart of the city, in the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park, the Genbaku Dome, one of the few buildings that survived the atomic blast, serves as a stark reminder of the city's past. Though Hiroshima may look different today, the same spirit that enabled the rebuilding process to succeed is still present. This recovery triumphantly revived and transformed Hiroshiman culture into what it is today, a change that turned the trauma of a single moment into what is now a future full of hope, prosperity, and peace.